Where's your other hand? Between two pillows. Those aren't pillows.
What's going on, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving, happy Turkey Day. Doug here, one of the host, producers, and creators of the Genre of Your Life podcast, here with a very special review Roundup episode for you all this week. Because of the holidays, there'll be no full episode of the podcast this week. With that said, though, look out for next week, the full episode of the podcast. We have a lot cooking for you all in store for you guys. And hopefully, if things go well, if the podcast gods and heavens are on our side, we should have our first full video element of the podcast for you guys next week. Things go well. If all things technical and audio, visual are all set to go, we should have a full episode of the podcast, a full video episode of the podcast for you guys on YouTube next week. Look out for that. Hopefully things go well. If not, I will keep you guys updated on our socials, of course. But in the meantime, this week, to hold you guys over on this lovely Thanksgiving holiday, I have my overdue review of ANORA and Smile 2, two films that I think are going to be very interesting to review. Kind of keep it non-spoiler. I know Smile 2 has been out for a while, and ANORA just came to the Phoenix market, I want to say a few weeks ago. So I finally caught up on those two before they left theaters altogether. So I'm looking forward to reviewing those two for you all on the podcast this week. And of course, my friends, you can find the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube Music. And we also have a full audio show on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Midway Avenue Productions. Whether you're on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or Apple, please rate, review the show, give us 5 stars. Share us with your friends and family, fellow movie fans, fellow podcast fans. Your support truly means the world to us. And of course, Apple Podcast fans, finding something like a broken drum at this point. We do need your help getting to 200 ratings on Apple Podcasts. Like I said, Apple Podcasts is like the heart and nucleus of all things podcast for entertainment and critics. The more reviews we get more ratings we get on Apple Podcasts, the more events and more coverage we can do as critics and reviewers for the podcast. More festivals, more conventions, more screeners, more screenings, and more interviews. So please rate and review the show. It means the world to us. And like I said, guys, thank you so much for the ongoing support. Like I said, it's been now 2 years we're doing the show. We're just growing, and a lot in store for you all for 2025. But of course, we got to end the year to 2024 on a very high note as well. So thank you all for listening, tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. Alrighty, my friends, getting down to business. I have 2 movies for you, as I mentioned, to review for you all this week. Two very different movies, I would say. But at the same time, I think 2 very well-deserving movies that have just 2 amazing performances, if you ask me. Might be probably 2 of my favorite performances I've seen from an actor this year. Actors, I said it, this year. And I'll start with Smile 2, because Smile 2, I feel like I might be one of the few people that I know in my immediate circle, both friends, coworkers, acquaintances, that absolutely love the first Smile movie. I'll be honest with you guys, the first Smile movie didn't work for me. I remember when it came out, I remember it was like September 2022, and the trailers seemed really creepy, and I was like, I would say I'm a new horror fan. I think I'm more into horror now, thanks in college, thanks to some friends and other acquaintances. And I remember the marketing was so very genius because, again, it was first a low-budget genre film from a studio, which was Paramount Pictures. And, that the era of, like, the studio horror movie, unless you're, like, a Blumhouse who has Universal backing for the most part, you don't really see a lot of other studio genre films of that caliber with that budget. I mean, again, it was a mid to low-budget movie, but wasn't an indie film, wasn't like, very low budget. It was like, I want to say like 15 to 20 mil, I want to say. And the marketing was so smart because they had people actually go to remember this, they had people go to like sporting events and actual like public events and just really that whole creepy smile. Look at the camera, whether it was the World Series, whether it was a basketball preseason, whether it was NFL football. They sent these kind of just like random, probably like extras or like aspiring actors to like go to these events, and this creepy smile, the way that creepy smile that they do in the movie, look at the camera. And it was really smart marketing because like all over Twitter and Instagram and like YouTube and TikTok were like, what is this thing? And what these people were wearing was like a kind of like basic, like generic plain t-shirt, whether it's a green, blue, white, yellow, whatever. And it was a smile. And it's a very, again, to me, that was viral marketing because you were getting on all platforms, but also people who still watched network television for sporting events saw that. You're like, what the actual hell is this? But it gained a lot of attraction, gained a lot of coverage for this movie, and I think it was very smart, low budget marketing from Paramount. So I think Paramount 2022 killed it because they had Top Gun Maverick, which dominated the box office, and then they had Smile, which made a lot of money. And I'm thinking, I think Sonic 2 came out that year too. So like a lot of films with Paramount was like, just they killed it that year in terms of box office. So obviously it worked because the movie made its budget back in the same weekend, and for an original horror film of that caliber from a studio, it was very successful, and it was like, wow, like this worked. I will be honest, I will say, like, when I saw it, I got around to it pretty late. I think I definitely watched it at home. I think I want to say I watched it like a month after it came, maybe 2 months when I got like Paramount Plus. And I was hearing things about it from friends and family. Like, oh, it was really good, like harsh shit. But I think I was kind of like just like, I think the podcast was beginning for us, and I was like very behind a lot of movies and shows, so I didn't get to see it in theaters. But I remember I watched it at home on Paramount Plus. I'm not gonna lie to you, I felt very underwhelmed, and I do believe that it was a little overhyped for me. And I was like, oh, this was the scariest movie of all time, I've been told. I mean, it was creepy and eerie, but I won't say it was the scariest thing I've ever seen. And I had a lot of problem with some of the character decisions and a lot of like the lore of this, like the supernatural of this movie. Again, I'm not giving spoiler for both Smile movies in this review, but I just wasn't really impressed with like the lore and just like the mythology of this like evil spirit and this demon. I was like, oh, it's supernatural. I was like, oh, okay. And I do think, I mean, performance-wise, I thought Kevin Bacon's daughter, and I forget her name, but the acting in the movie I thought was very, very well done. And the way Parker Finn, who was the writer-director of the Smile movies, the way he definitely captured tension and kind of captured uncomfortableness was very, very well done and very directed very well. Soshi Bacon, who's Kevin Bacon's daughter, I thought the way she kind of like plays this stressed doctor, and the way like the movie takes a toll on her, like her mental health and her just like, this whole psyche overall was like, you felt for her because you're just like, oh my gosh, give this girl a break, please. And I did like the performances a lot. I thought a lot of the films, most of the film was directed very well, because it's more of a slow burn of a horror film that's kind of fast paced, like a Michael Myers or a Jason or a Freddy, or in kind of like other recent Blumhouse films or recent big horror films. Smile was a very slow burn. It was very a slower, character driven horror film, and I do give it props for that. But I don't know, I was very, I'm gonna say bored, but I was very kind of just like, I didn't feel the connection to the characters. And I think the movie towards the end was a bit rushed, and a lot of things went unexplained. There were some things kind of you can fill in on your own, but I was like, wait, huh? I didn't really feel fulfilled. And I was like, oh, okay. But again, I do have to give the movie props that it was original, lower budget sort of film for the big screen from a major studio that did very well. And I do think, as we've seen the past couple of years, horror has been one of the kings of the box office, whether it's thanks to stuff like It or, films from the Blumhouse. A horror has been very, I would say, consistent. Or A24 horror, for example, or neon horror. Like, horror to me is still one of the last few genres that keeps on bringing people in with original storytelling. I do think, obviously, the big budget, the big franchises still bring an audience in, of course, but out of all the non-superhero IP, not superhero, franchise IP, I think horror really has been the kind of leading, factor in terms of bringing people to the theaters. Think of Longlegs. Nick liked Longlegs more than I did. I thought Longlegs was kind of like overhyped as well. But look at even stuff like Five Nights at Freddy's, which I didn't really care for. I think Nick enjoyed a bit more than I did. Still made a bunch of money. That was also day and day release on Peacock. So horror to me has really been the kind of like returning factor for a lot of audiences for the movies, and especially post COVID, that horror still seems to be the genre that keeps bringing people back to the movies, if not keeping it alive at the same time with the other IP franchise films. So I had to give Smile its flowers, but I wasn't really impressed. I thought I was kind of bored throughout of it all. So when I heard Smile 2 was being announced, I was like, okay, that makes sense, because it made a lot of money on a shoestring budget. Obviously, the studios want to capitalize on, things that actually work in terms of genre, in terms of storytelling, obviously. So kind of a no-brainer that Smile 2 is going to happen. But what I heard, I remember the reports where it was like, no, it's a different person, which makes sense because a movie like this works better as a more like whole like anthology kind of more of like a kind of like Black Mirror type of thing. And I do think that movies like that is I have more of a draw to anthology series, anthology movies now because again you can like leave the baggage of the last film or show kind of behind, and I do like that we're giving more attention to anthology and also decent again the lower not the huge budget films because again it shows that with the certain budget I think sometimes filmmakers have more leeway but also have more kind of like and less restraints I'll say I'll put it that way. But again, as someone who didn't like care for the first Smile, I was like, I get again, it makes sense financially, but as a moviegoer, I was like, I don't know. But when it came out, got really good reviews. I think Smile 2 came out, I think the weekend or week before Thanksgiving, Halloween. And a lot of coworkers, a lot of friends of mine said, yo, man, Smile 2, man, that's a good sequel right there. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll enjoy it more than the first. Maybe if not. I gotta say, I definitely did enjoy it more than the first, but I won't say by much, I'll be honest. Right off the bat, though, I thought Naomi Scott was just remarkable in this. Like I said, Sochi Bacon in the first one, like you feel for her character because like she goes through a lot. That's nothing compared to what Naomi Scott's character has to go through in this movie. And for some context, as I said, Smile. It's how do I really pitch this movie in a way of like keeping a non-spoiler. But anyway, Smile 2 follows story of a pop star who's about to embark on a world tour. Global pop star, Sky Riley begins experiencing increasingly terrifying and inexplicable and unexplained events. Overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and pressures of fame, Sky is forced to face her past. And, I will say, I think people said other reviews in the first movie itself, the evil entity in these movies does not give a single fuck about any of its victims. Like it is a slow torture within. If you don't know the rules of Smile basically is that once this demon or entity kind of like gets you, if you see whoever how do I explain this? It's like if you see someone kill themselves that has this demon or entity, if you see this, if someone kills themselves, commits suicide, but with this demon inside them, and you see it, the demon is now passed to you. It's somehow passed to you, and now you have this demon now within you. Do they ever explain that in these movies? No. And that's why I did have a problem with the first one. I had the same problem with this one. Is like, how does that work? How does this really work? It kind of goes unexplained. And that could be more of a nitpick or whatever. And I get it. You come at me with that. But a lot of these rules, a lot of these kind of like these things aren't really explained at all. It's kind of like your own interpretation or like, it is what it is. And I get it. I don't want to sound snobbish or like, oh, I'm better than this movie. And I'm not. Because I would love to make a movie like this on any kind of, I think all of us would. It's just a lot of the rules of these movies don't really make sense, or you're like, wait a second. But again, I'm rambling. Back to Naomi Scott. She's playing this kind of like, I wouldn't say Taylor Swift, but very kind of like rising pop star. I mean, Dua Lipa, I would say rising pop star. Very beloved. Had a rough past though with drugs and alcohol. Rough past with past boyfriends, and when you see her, when we meet her at the beginning of the movie until we're at the very end, you really feel for her because like she's been through a lot, and this demon says, "Ooh, yum! Like I got the perfect victim. She's famous and she's a fucked up past. Sign me up. This is my ultimate ideal victim." And the movie itself, like the first one, still a slow burn, but I think how they escalate Sky Riley's kind of like torment with this demon goes a bit faster than Sochi Bacon's character in the first one, and to an extreme, because not only is this girl still kind of recovering from a really like drug and alcohol background, but like it's trauma times 1,000, and this demon is just really kind of just like upping the trauma to a T, like full on max. You're just like, oh my gosh, like leave this girl alone, please. And I do think Parker Finn, who makes these movies, who is the right director of both films, knew how to like, hey, how can we up the ante from the first one? Let's get a kind of Dua Lipa, kind of like rising pop star, on the kind of like on the comeback tour basically, and let's just like mess her shit up, and they go full out. And I will say, this movie definitely more grisly. It's definitely more gory, more violent, I would say. And again, I was definitely more maybe also seeing this one in theaters. I definitely may have had more of like not enjoyable, but like I think I definitely enjoyed watching it more than the first one. And with that said, I think the opening 8 minutes of this movie is fantastic. Because again, no spoilers. Spoilers. It's been out for a few weeks. Okay, no spoilers still. The way Parker Finn opens this movie, I think was genius, and I thought it was kept you engaged the very first frame. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And this is the way that he shoots this scene, because it's more of an action thriller scene than a horror scene. And you're just like, yo, wow. And it's just the way they shoot it, the way like it's like all like, almost a wonder in a way. And this the tension, the way like the camera's moving in and out, and the thing that this character has to do in the first 10 minutes of the movie, you're just like, dear Lord, like what's going on here? It's bonkers and wild, but it's so creative in so many different ways. Where I kept thinking about the opening scene, I was like, man, the opening scene was awesome. And people said this in a review or an article. They said Parker Finn should do this for his next movie, not stepping away, do horror, but like the way he kind of crafts this kind of action like shootout scene was just really very well directed, but very, very well choreographed. And I think he has maybe an act or maybe a calling for an action film, because the first 8 minutes of this movie is explosive and just so well done. Where the whole movie I was like, man, I kind of watch that opening scene again and again, because I was just so like, shocked by it in the best possible way. And I was just like, again, in awe. I was like, man, this opening scene is awesome, because like the way he fuses action and tension with very cool camera work and very cool choreography is like, again, for a second feature from the director, pretty damn impressive. So hats off to you, sir. And like I said, kind of like the first film, this film has a lot of cool camera work, a lot of cool shots, a lot of cool shots of like over the city, a lot of cool establishing shots, a lot of cool shots of like scene transitions and scenes like whether like dealing with Sky, like her downward spiral of like what she's going through, or different character interactions or introductions. The cinematography and camera work in this is truly remarkable. I'm sitting there like, wow, how are they pulling some of these shots off? How are they pulling this shot off? Like, it's very stylish, but it also adds a lot to the story. And I think maybe my favorite part of these movies is the camera work and the cinematography, because I'm like, wow, these are really just really well established shots, and like certain things in the background, if you blink and you miss it, kind of like the first film too. If you like someone's walking by, you see them in the background, like the attention to detail in some of these shots were just really, really well crafted and well shot, where I was like, man, hats off to the cinematography and the camera crew in this, because they pull off some really cool, like very like memorable shots and sequences. The supporting cast I thought was good. It is Naomi Scott's movie for sure. Like, it is just a character driven story of, again, a comeback, a pop star on her comeback tour whose dad was going to make her go through the ringer of just like, oh my gosh, like what next? But her mom, Elizabeth, was Mary DeWitt from La La Land. She was in one of my favorite underrated comedies, The Watch. She was in The Boys. She was in Black Mirror. Great actress. And I really did like the chemistry and the dynamic between her, Sky, and her mom, because you feel you feel the love from her mom, because you see a lot of times in like real life, pop stars and musicians, like a lot of their parents kind of like use them for money, use them for their like celebrity or their clout, whatever. But with this, you really do feel like Elizabeth, played by Rosemary DeWitt, loves her daughter. She wants her daughter kind of like on this comeback tour. Like, she means well. She wants to see her daughter succeed because she believes in her. Like, she's fully supporting her since day one. And I thought the chemistry between the two of them was very beautiful and very just it felt real. It felt like, wow, like it's a really film like a mother, like a parent and child relationship, no matter how big, no how famous the daughter is. And I love that a lot. But everyone else, I thought the supporting cast was kind of just like, just there to fill in scenes or kind of to add time. Like Lucas Gage, Miles Gutierrez Riley, Peter Jacobson, and even Dylan, last name Galula, and Raul Castillo. A lot of the supporting cast just felt like they're just kind of add exposition, or kind of they're kind of use kind of just like, hey, like this person is this person, or this person is part of this person, whatever, or this person part of this crew, or this person has this this pull in her career, or this person, whatever, and it just kind of felt like they were just there. But I do think the heart of this movie is the mother and daughter relationship between these two characters. With that said, though, I thought Lucas Gage, who kind of in the trailer passes the demon to Sky Riley in the film, that scene was very creepy because again, it's the way Parker Finn kind of builds tension and kind of like builds suspense. You're just like, oh my gosh, and you're as an audience, you know, like how if you've seen the first film, you know how messed up this demon is and how messed up like he makes them kill themselves. It's like, oh Jesus. So it's very uncomfortable, very disturbing, very gory. And Lucas Gage, like the way he kind of passes the demon to Sky Riley, Naomi Scott, is like, oh gross. Even I was like, ugh. Like it's just the way it's just like in frame. It's very like it doesn't pull away. You're just like, oh my gosh, like this is haunting and disturbing. And it sits with you. And I think in the first film, some shots kind of stuck with me, but again, I only saw it once, and I was just like, okay. But in this one, there's some shots I saw it now. It was a few weeks ago I saw it now, and I was like, oh, that was gross. That was disturbing. That was yucky. Like, ugh. So, and again, a lot of it felt practical too, and I do think why horror is doing very well in the box office nowadays as a genre leading films is that a lot of cool horror films are done practically now. Like I think of stuff like someone watched this year, not Immaculate, Long Legs, for example. Long Legs, I don't really care for it, but a lot of it was practical, which was really cool. Strange Darling, that I loved, practical. A lot of Alien Romulus was practical. A lot of Late Night with the Devil, a lot of it was practical. So a lot of horror movies that I've seen this year benefited from actual practical and special effects makeups instead of like VFX or green screen or whatever. And I do think when genre films can use practical effects and locations, it makes it feel more real, more scary, more like uncomfortable. And that's credit to them. They can do actual like in camera, in frame stuff. Why I have a problem with these movies, like I said, as I mentioned briefly in the beginning of this review, there's a lot of things don't really make sense or add up. You're just like, wait, with this movie, wait a second. If this was this, play by your own rules. Like, wait a second. That why? It was not confusing, but it was very convoluted. So you're like, wait, that felt was this real? What wasn't real? And it kind of just like, what kind of makes you think what was real? And I get it. I do appreciate to a degree, but the movie wasn't playing playing with its own rules to a point where I was like, that doesn't make sense. And where the movie kind of ends up or kind of leads to, you're like, wait, what? And you're like, no, wait a second. It kind of makes you like double think of like, no, that wouldn't make sense, or this wouldn't make this person would be here, this would happen, blah blah blah. And the movie kind of just like scrambles over that so quickly, which was my big issue with the first one, because I was like, wait, if this happened, why didn't this happen after? Or you spent so much time doing this, and this thing wasn't real. This thing was all imagination. You're like, no, that doesn't make sense. So I think these films don't really follow its own rules at times, where I'm like, no, you established these for a reason. Follow through with it. Don't pull this thing of like, oh, look at this twist. Like, it could be a twist, but you can't have these own rules and not follow them if you're like making a big deal of them. So I had that's why I think I'm not a huge fan of these films, is because they don't follow their own rules and they don't really like clarify really anything. And when the movie ends, you're just like, wait, if that happened, no, wait a second. You kind of call bullshit. You're like, no. Wait, hold on, bring it back. And I think sometimes these movies get a little too ahead of themselves. So like, look, we're ahead of the curve, and guess what? This actually happened, and you're just like, no, because why spend all this time establishing all this stuff or establishing these scenes and different characters to be like, I don't know, was this really a thing, or was this all the imagination? Was this thing happen actually? It's like, no, I call bullshit. So I have the same problem with both these films because both these films did the same thing. And I'm like, you're kind of just not listening to your own rules. And again, I don't need anything, again, some complainer like, oh, you need something kind of like spoon fed to you, a cookie cut to you. No, I don't need that. But there are some things where I'm like, if this is a big deal, explain how this happened, explain why this is happening, explain the origin of this, explain like how does this happen, explain why this does this, whatever. And both films do not explain really anything. So you're just like, I mean, there's one thing explain how certain people got it through whatever. And there is, again, keeping this light spoilery, non-spoilery, there is a connection to the first film in a few different ways. But at the beginning, as much as I love the beginning, I said, wait, hold up now. If that happened, how did that happen? And then after the movie ended, I had to kind of Google it. I was like, oh, I should have watched the first one again before seeing this one. I saw it at Smile 2, like the last day my theater had it in my apartment. So I was like, use my Regal Pass. I'm going to see before it leaves theaters for good. So I probably should have watched the first one before seeing this. I will admit that. So I had to Google one thing. I was like, how did that happen? And then I think it was like Cinema Blend or Collider. They were like, remember in the first one, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. So for a while I was like, oh, ain't no way. Like, hold up now, what? So then I just forgot of like a certain rule of this demon. I was like, okay, for sure. So with that said, I definitely enjoyed this one a bit more than the first. It definitely was creepy seeing it by myself in a theater of one. It was just me, and I was kind of made me feel kind of eerie when the movie ended. I was like, because when I saw it, it was still light out. The movie ended. I walked out, it was dark out. I was like, ooh, creepy. And then when I saw the movie myself, I was looking around. I'm like, am I still alone in this theater? Am I still like by myself? Like, very eerie. So with that said, because I really liked the opening scene a lot, I really liked Naomi Scott a lot, and the cinematography. I think I get the first one, either 4 or 5. And the ending, I will say the ending is very ambiguous. The ending is very ambiguous, very ambitious, where I was like, wow. I think this one did pretty well, if not the same amount as the first one. I don't think the budget's really increased that much either. So there's definitely room for a third one for sure, because when this one ends, you're just like, yo, where can you take this one? Because the first one is, like I said, pretty damn ambitious and very ambiguous for the genre and the story that it's kind of like set up already for these films. So again, I would be intrigued for a third one, because just how it ends, you're just like, how can you pull this off if you do a third one? So, but I do, like I said, I do want to see Parker Finn do more of an action film, because like I said, the first 8 minutes, I was just like, wow, like this is just out of this world, well done, well crafted, well action paced, well paced, good action, good, cool choreography. So I would like to see him do something else that isn't horror first before doing a Smile 3. But I will say I'm definitely more intrigued seeing a Smile 3 than I probably would have been before seeing this one, before seeing Smile 2. After the first one, like I said, I was like, I don't care. But I am intrigued for a third one if they do a third one. So, like I said, it's very ambiguous and very ambitious ending. So I give this a solid 3 out of 5. Or sorry, I would say 6 out of 10. If you love the first one, for sure see this one. If you're a big horror fan, I recommend seeing this if it's still playing in theaters. I think it's on Paramount Plus or VOD now. But if you're a horror fan, if you like the first one a lot, I think it's definitely worth seeing. I think it's definitely seeing in theaters. I'd do more of like a low matinee, I would say, seeing this. So yeah, guys. Again, you come at me. I know I'm not a big fan of the first one, but again, I do consider I give this props for being an original horror film, for a big original horror genre film for a studio with that budget. I give its flowers. So. Let me know what you guys think of Smile 2 or the franchise in the comment section, whether on YouTube or Apple or Spotify, because we want to hear from you guys. Alrighty, my friends, moving on to a very different film, but again, with a great leading performance as well, and that is ANORA. And ANORA is, I think, ANORA won the Palme des whatever award at the Cannes Film Festival, which is one of the biggest film festivals in the world. And ANORA is Sean Baker's next film, and Sean Baker is the director of Florida Project, Red Rocket, and a bunch of other movies. But I think he's really first, really kind of big attention to fame as a director was Florida Project, a movie that I saw kind of late. I'm not gonna lie, and I thought it was good, not great, but a movie definitely special because of the cinematography, but also because it's Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is one of the greatest actors of all time. He will forever be my Green Goblin because as a kid he scared the shit out of me seeing watching the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. But I know Sean Baker has more of a career before more doing a lot of indie films. His whole career has been indie films, but I think his first kind of like really like look out for this guy is the Florida Project, which is by A24, and I think they got like Best Picture. No, it was only thing that year was best supporting actor, which was nomination by Willem Dafoe. But I remember that came out. It was like, that was when I realized A24 is like, yo, look out for them. Dude, that was the same year as like Lady Bird, Good Time. And when we saw the Alamo Draft House in Phoenix, Alamo really pushed heavy for A24 films. Like almost every movie I saw, whether it was a studio film or indie film, you would see a bunch of A24 films because Alamo was really pushing A24 and like kind of getting the name out there. And I know A24 before that was kind of like still on the rise with like The Witch and the one that Swiss Army Man. So they were kind of like on the rise with some of their films. But 2017 is when I realized I'm like, oh wow, there's this A24 studio. Like, look out for them. They got some pretty cool stuff. Moonlight, obviously, was 2016. So like that was when I remember we were sophomores in film school at ASU, and it was just all. I mean, it was like wow, everyone. I mean, every film I had like A24 this, A24 that. So they were like, oh. Also, that year was also one of my favorite A24 films was Disaster Artist, which I love that movie so much. And that's when I again really realized why I was like, yeah, A24 is a studio film company to look out for. But again, I watched Florida Project maybe like after seeing Red Rocket a few months ago, and I was like, oh, it was good. I think it was very, very beautifully shot, a real movie. But to me, I was just like, okay. Red Rocket, I remember talking to my mom about it because like they had Simon Rex, aka Dirt Nasty. I think listened to like an interview with him on a podcast, and she's like, hey, you know we call Red Rocket? I'm like, I've heard of it. I remember it came out like Christmas 2021, and that's when like theaters were sort of coming back because it was like we're getting out of COVID, but I think a new strain of the virus was kind of coming back to theaters. So, but like at the time, all anyone cared about for Christmas 2021 for movies were Spider-Man: No Way Home, including myself. I mean, I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and I love that movie so much. But it was like films were starting to come back a little bit. I mean, a lot of the like the big studio franchises were kind of like carrying the torch. They're like, hey, movies are back. Come see this movie in the theaters, whatever. And I remember Red Rocket. I remember seeing trailer for Red Rocket either. Oh man, what did we watch? It was either for, I think it was Late Night at Soho by Edgar Wright, or man, I don't remember what movie we saw. Man, I forgot what movie we saw. But with that said, I remember seeing the trailer for it, and I was like, oh, this is intriguing. And I'm like, because I know Simon Rex more was a rapper. I know he was like boys with Riff Raff and what's the boy's name? Andy, whatever his name is, Galifianakis, whatever his name is. I'm butchering his name. But I knew him from more as a rapper and like kind of like also from Scary Movie, like what 3 and 4, I think even 5 too. So I knew him a little bit, but the trailer was very kind of like, oh, this looks kind of interesting. I remember watching the trailer twice, and I was like, yeah, I could watch this. But I don't think it played really at all in the Phoenix area. I want to say maybe it was playing like a few theaters, so I didn't go see it when it came out. Also, I think it was more obsessed with like, oh, Spider-Man: No Way Home's here, and then like Matrix 4 was coming out, and all the other movies were coming out. I was like, oh my gosh, like movies are back. And also, I was, I moved to a new apartment, and I was like, I was seeing somebody. I was like, a new job, whatever. So I was like, kind of just like all over the place. So I didn't get a chance to see it when it came out originally on theaters, and then I think I started watching it maybe on Showtime a year or two ago, and I think I started watching like maybe around late at night, and I was like, I'm gonna watch this, and I fell asleep, and I was like, all right. I went back to it, and then I think Showtime either pulled it off or went to another streaming service I didn't have the time, maybe like Cinemax or whatever, or Stars. But I finally watched it over the summer, like in August. I knew ANORA was coming out because I remember me and Nick saw the trailer for ANORA when we saw Long Legs. Oh, that looks pretty good. Oh, Red Rocket. Okay, gotta watch that. So I watched Red Rocket, I remember in August, and the movie is very well made. Red Rocket is a really well made movie. I think it's It's directed very well, and you can tell it's a very very low budget film, even for A24. You're just like, this is probably one of the lowest budget A24 films. And I was very captured by Simon Rex, his performance, because I was like, wow, this is like, when you see a lot of like musicians turn actors, it can be either really good or really shit. Really shit. You're like, okay. But I think that Sean Baker crafted the film around Simon Rex as his character a lot. So I was like, and I think Simon Rex also was like, maybe before like a rapper actor. I think he worked in the adult entertainment scene. So like he had experience in that background. But it seemed that Sean Baker kind of like made this movie for him and like crafted it around him in a way, which I think a lot of filmmakers do. Like they make the movie kind of like around them or wrote it for them. And the good story is like when Tarantino wrote Pulp Fiction, the character of Jules for Sam Jackson directly. So I do like when filmmakers kind of craft a movie for a certain actor or actors, because it feels like it was definitely made for them. It kind of feels more authentic, feels more real. And it's a bit long. I thought Red Rocket was a very well-made movie. Some of the things were very questionable in terms of like character choices and decisions, but I was definitely captured by the charm and the realness of it all. You're just like, oh wow, this is like a really well-made A24 film. But like again, Sean Baker is really good at kind of crafting really well-driven character movies. So with ANORA, because ANORA won the Palm Day whatever at Cannes, was like the best award you can get at the film festival, I believe, for Cannes Film Festival. But ANORA follows the story of title ANORA, a young sex worker from Brooklyn meets and impulsively marries the son of a powerful Russian a billionaire. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened, and his parents head out to New York to get the marriage annulled. I will say, people. This movie has been now the front runner for like best picture of the year. She's gonna win best actress. I will definitely say this is definitely one of the best performances of the year by far. Is it the best? In my reaction, I said it's debatable. I think the year is still very young, so a lot of movies to check out before the year ends. But I think it is one of the best performances I've seen in a while. But however, I do think Naomi Scott gives this movie kind of like, and Smile 2 gives this performance a run for her money, because I thought what Naomi Scott had to do in Smile 2 was very more daunting and more just more like stressed and just more like chaotic, where there's definitely chaos in ANORA for sure. And ANORA is played by Mikey Madison, who was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as well as she played one of the Manson kids that I think Leo torches her on fire with the blowtorch. And she also one of the teens in the recent Scream reboot, which is Scream 5 in 2022. So she's very good at playing kind of just like unhinged characters. So, props to her. But Mikey Madison brings a lot. People are kind of saying this kind of the movie kind of comes like the anti-Pretty Woman. I can see that for sure. And Mikey Madison, really brings a whole lot to this movie. Just the vulnerability, just like the confidence, the charm. I would say it's a very distinct charm. I would say it's a very Brooklyn charm to a degree, but she brings a lot to the table as a performance. So I would definitely agree it's one of the best performances of the year. I will say, it is definitely Sean. I think it's definitely Sean Baker's best film as a filmmaker. But I do think I enjoyed Red Rocket a bit more in terms of kind of like the story and the structure, and definitely me more. I felt more of like the overall story. I kind of like stuck with me a bit more. ANORA, though, I'll say this movie is really funny, because I heard going into it like this movie's like really funny, it's hilarious, and I was like, okay, a lot of these indie neon A24 films like so funny, and I'm like, oh, okay. Last year, Dream Scenario was so funny, and I was like, not really. It was uncomfortably funny, but I wouldn't say it was funny. But with ANORA, I was laughing out loud a lot. Where I was like, I saw it twice too, because I'm not gonna lie. When I first saw it, I dozed off briefly, because I saw it like at 10:30 at night. It's also a 2.5 hour movie. I dozed off really briefly, so I wanted to watch it again when it came to my local theater, because Phoenix got it pretty late in terms of like more widespread theaters. With that said, though, I was laughing aloud a lot in this movie, where I was like, this movie's really funny. And again, I was laughing out loud even the second time I'm singing. I'm like, this movie's like, Sean Baker knows how to capture kind of like really kind of like cringy, but also kind of funny moments that make it even more funny, I would say. And a lot of the supporting cast kind of added to the humor a lot. And what I do think what Sean Baker does very well, as well as kind of the Safdie brothers who did like, Good Time and Uncut Gems, Sean Baker knows how to cast like off the street. And I think the Safdie brothers call it like off the street casting, or what's the phrase they use, whatever. So Sean Baker casts like real people in these roles. Like you don't see like, Zendaya, you don't see Timothée Chalamet, you don't see Tom Holland, you don't see like, Austin Butler or Florence Pugh or, Tom Cruise. Like he casts really people like off the street. Like, hey, you work at this club? Cool. You're in a movie now. Congratulations. Or a lot of the guys in Uncut Gems, the Safdie brother kind of casted like actual jewelers, actually who worked in like the jewel district in New York. Even in Good Time too, a lot of people that were in Good Time were like off the street working. Hey, like I'm a recovering addict, recovering alcoholic, whatever. Blah blah blah. I'm out of jail, and then like, cool, you're in a movie. Like I do think the Safdies and Sean Baker are coming from the generation of like guerrilla casting of just like, hey, you want to be in a movie? Cool. It's because it feels more real and authentic. And most of the time, a lot of these kind of like off the street castings turn out to work. Like, oh wow, I don't know this person as an actor. Oh, it's their first movie. Good to know. They did a good job. And I do like seeing unknown actors in movies like this because again, it's an indie film. And I do think when indie films have smaller, more of a smaller budget, but also again with like unknown actors, it adds the authenticity and the realness of these movies, given the subject matter. And I think everyone, again, if you don't know Mikey Madison, like I said, and she was in Tarantino's Hollywood, and then she was in Scream. But for the most part, I don't know, no, not for all, I didn't know anyone else in this movie. I didn't know any other actor, and I was like, cool, I'm definitely more immersed and engaged in this because I don't know so-and-so's playing Igor. I know who's playing this person. I know who's playing Vanya. I don't know who's playing Toros or Garnick. I'm like, okay, cool, I like that. Like, I know who are these people. And I think Sean Baker can get any good performance out of anybody. And I think, like I said though, I think for most audiences, they will not know Mikey Madison unless you remember her from her as a man's kid in Hollywood, or like I said, Scream 5. So that's kudos Sean Baker for really kind of casting unknowns, getting like really good performances out of them. Like his other movies, I'll say, Sean Baker has a pacing issue, and I think a lot of his films are bloated and too long. This is like 2.5 hours. I remember Red Rocket was about 2.5 hours, and I want to say Florida Project was a little 2.5 hours too. Let me check. No, Florida Project was 2 hours, but it felt like 2.5. Red Rocket was 210, felt like 2.5 hours, and then Nora's 220. So he has, I think, a lot of his movies, and granted too, I think Judd Apatow sometimes has a problem with his pacing too, where like for these kind of movies, they feel a bit long. And I think with ANORA, I think the first half was well paced, on the money, like go, like really kind of like funny, fast moving, blah blah blah. And then it hits like the middle. You're like, okay, we're slowing down a lot, and then it slows down quite a bit. And then like maybe towards the third act, you're like, boom, 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 kind of captures the ball rolling again. And I remember that even Red Rocket too. Red Rocket opening, boom, 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 slow second, middle act, and then towards the end, towards the third act, boom, 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 kind of like paces up again. So I think I noticed with his 3 films now that as a filmmaker, he has a pacing issue, and I think also his films kind of feel overly long. Where no fault to his own as a filmmaker, but I think he kind of like. He makes certain scenes with full dialogue. All his movies are dialogue heavy. They're all dialogue based and all character driven. They just kind of feel long for no reason. You're like, okay, why is this scene about her yelling going on for 25 minutes? Okay, it feels long. And again, I think people have the same issue with Tarantino at times of like, okay, it's very like, look at my dialogue. It's very real. And I give him that. But for a character driven movie and very heavy dialogue based films, you want to make sure that like you're not losing the audience. You're not kind of like bombarding them with exposition or too much dialogue because you're like, okay, the scene's now for going on 25 minutes. What's going to happen next? Let's keep the characters moving. What's going to happen next? Whatever. So it is a kind of pattern I've seen with all his movies that I've seen personally. And I would assume his other films prior to Florida Project have the same kind of pacing and bloated runtimes. But again, I can kill that. A lot of filmmakers I know that Judd Apatow I have the same issue with at times. So no, that's why I can definitely see for what it is. I thought the chemistry between Nora, played by Mikey Madison, and the actor playing Vanya, Mark, Russian actor, I'm going to try to butcher her last name, definitely was like, oh, like they had that movie magic for sure. But I will say there's not a lot of likable characters in this movie because the whole time you're just like, you're kind of a dick. You're kind of an ass. Like, okay, like, sure, I understand, I guess, whatever. And I think even like things like Uncut Gems or Good Time, like both Adam Sandler's character in Uncut Gems and Robert Pattinson's character in Good Time is that they weren't likable people. They weren't, but they had a charm to them. And I think similar to now to Becky Madison and Honora, they weren't likable, but she had a charm to her. But I do think I definitely enjoyed Sandler's character in Uncut Gems and Pattinson's character more in Good Time because, like, oh yeah, they were schmuck and kind of douchey, but you kind of like them. And I did feel that way with Honora, but there was times where she was kind of being mean just to be mean. And you're like, okay, you're kind of just being a dick. Like, okay, sure. But again, her whole job is hustle. Hey, make this money, make this bread. Like, let's get this money. I'm a dancer. I'm a sex worker. Like, my thing is like, I need this money. I live in New York, one of the most expensive cities in the world. I need this money. I need this work. Like, I need this cheddar. So like, I get it. But once the movie kind of progresses, I could not stand Vanya, the character Vanya, and I do think props to the actor Mark who's playing him. I couldn't, because he was a spoiled nepo baby, rich kid prick. You're just like, man, you're just an asshole. You're just a trust fund baby who doesn't care about anyone else but yourself. You're a spoiled brat. You've been enabled with this behavior so long, and then when you see these actors who are kind of like his dad's handlers who are in the U.S. trying to like clean up his mess, you feel for him because you're like, man, you've been dealing with this shit for how long? Props to you, because this kid is a prick. This kid is a little asshole. So I like that. Like, you can tell like these his dad's goons in New York are just like, his handlers are just like, yeah, I with you guys. You got to deal with all this shit. I don't blame you why you're so upset and so pissed off, because this kid is a little shit. Go all off on him, please do. But this kid is always used to getting his way. You're just like, man, you're just a little shit. In my reaction, I said the actor who plays Igor, and I'm probably butcher his name too, Yura Borisov, again, Russian actor. I'm not familiar with him. I thought he stole the show for me because he was so funny, and I would love for him to get him an Oscar nomination, if not Golden Globe nomination, because he was so funny, and he's probably the nicest and most likable character in this movie. Because at first you're kind of like, you guys there kind of like by accident, but then like he's there for the rest of the movie. You're just like, oh, so you're in this for long, okay? And you kind of, again, you like him because he's very likable. He's one of the nicest people in this movie. But towards like the middle to the end, he had something where I was like, oh, dude, you warmed my heart by doing that. And again, you can tell it's kind of leading up to something kind of like this. But when it happens, you're just like, good for you for doing that. Like, I respect that. And that's why I thought, that's why he won me over for real. I was like, oh, I like him a lot. He's a good character because he means well. He kind of is there by accident. He's there kind of just like following orders by his boss. And again, they're kind of like the lovable goon henchman that's kind of just there by accident, but like it's kind of soft. I mean, tough on the outside, but a softy on the inside. And this actor does a really good job kind of like portraying that throughout his introduction to the very end of the movie. It's like, oh, that's cute. And everyone's so mean to him, but I'm like, he's so nice. Soundtrack, again, you know me, I'm a big hip hop rap fan. So a lot of the soundtrack is definitely more pop. But then when it does hip hop, there's a few DMX songs. I was like, yeah, Sean Baker, put some DMX in that for sure. So the soundtrack I thought was really good because there's no score in this movie. It's all soundtrack based and soundtrack driven. So I'm like, I think a lot of films I like, or a lot of them are soundtrack driven. But I think with this movie, the soundtrack kind of adds a lot to like the New York feel to it, to the club vibe of the movie, the Brooklyn feel to it. So when a soundtrack can like really kind of like portray a lot in a movie, I'm always sold on that. And cinematography in this was beautiful because again, a lot of these indie films, like I said, a lot of these low budget films, they have to use their location to the fullest. And I think when they're in New York, whether they're in Nevada a few times, no matter where they go, the locations just feel real. And again, it's the power of having an indie film budget because you have to really utilize your location to the fullest because again, you ain't on no volume, not using a green screen or blue screen or soundstage. Like just the realness of practical locations adds so much authenticity and realness to the movies. And again, I think, I see with Neon this year did a pretty good job. Neon had this film, They had Cuckoo, which my review of that wasn't crazy about that either, or Long Legs, and they also did a movie with Sydney Sweeney that I haven't seen called Immaculate. I heard it was kind of like very mixed as well. But out of all the Neon films, Neon to me is kind of like the cousin of A24 in a way, like both up and coming, kind of like low budget indie film studios that like give their filmmakers kind of creative freedom to do whatever you want. Very interesting and very ambitious films. So I do think we're going to see a lot more A24 Neon films because I do think they're giving a lot of more leeway, a lot more creative freedom to their filmmakers and the creators. So I'll definitely say this is probably my favorite Neon film of the year for sure. I'm teetering that's in my top 10 or not of the year so far. I've seen it twice because I want to see it twice. Because I wanted to see it twice. I'm glad I did. But I think it's still playing in select theaters now. But also, I do want to support original indie films like this on the big screen. Because again, it's Sean Baker had a good interview. I think it was for AP or something where he was like, "Hey, listen, I get it. I'm all for like the big budget movies, but like, where are the films for like adults? Where are the films for like grown-ups that like the rated R, like comedy drama, the human stories? Like, we have a lot of explosions and spectacles, whatever. But what about the films for like, where are like the Nora Ephron films? Where are the Rob Reiner films? Like, where When Harry Met Sally's or Pretty Women? Like, where are those films? I do think those era films have kind of been forgotten, or they would be made for streaming now. Like a movie like that would be go for Hulu or go right to Amazon Prime or Netflix. So I give Sean Baker a lot of kudos for still making his brand of movies for the big screen, for more of a mature adult audiences. Because I do think that a lot of times, except for horror, and I think he said in the AP interviews that, listen, horror is still there, but where are the human-driven, character-driven stories made for adults that are rated R? Because again, it's just that era kind of seems to be kind of forgotten, or not as made as much anymore, or for the big screen at least. So I really do hope that this movie, it doing well, films like Long Legs doing well, really kind of opened the door for more films like from Neon or A24, or even films from the big studios, whether Disney, Fox, or Paramount, Universal, Warner Brothers, Sony, that like Lionsgate, that like, hey, listen, like we want to like invest more in these smaller budget, human character driven movies. And I do think, you hear us on the show all the time that, we'll praise original film like this, whether it's a movie like Blink Twice, that was the Amazon MGM film for the big screen. The Bike Riders, obviously Focus Features, Universal. So we always try to praise original films, lower budget original films like this, because again, it's like they're almost kind of like a fossil or on the edge of extinction, because again, when we live in the big blockbusters and IP films, and we all love those films. Let's be real, all those films. Being here on the podcast, Nick and I and all the boys, we praise those movies all the time. But it is refreshing to kind of go to a movie theater and just watch character-driven human stories. Again, we're all human at the end of the day, and sometimes we can we can relate to it and kind of just see a lot of like similarity and differences in these movies. So I really do hope that within the next year we're going to see a lot more original, just dramas in the theater, or dramedies in theaters. And I think it's fun to see it with the crowd. I will say, once I saw that was originally a few weeks ago, or a week or two ago, I saw it with the crowd, and that was kind of fun to see. And then seeing it on a week or two ago, I saw it by myself, and it was just myself. I was like, I still enjoyed it either way, but I do think a movie like this probably would benefit from seeing with the crowd, if you can see it with the crowd, that is. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else I can talk about this movie that I think I'm going to praise it for. Cinematography was good; it was great. Performance was really good, and the actors who were playing the Russian dads, like goons. Their names are Karen Garulian and Vache, I forget his name, Tomavasian, who play Taurus and Garnick, added a lot to the movie, because again, it's like they're like the most likable henchmen, likable like fixers, whatever, like ever, because they're like we don't mean harm, but like we gotta fix this shit, we gotta make this right, whatever, because our boss is gonna kick our ass, whatever. And it's funny because it's like, hey, like they're trying to do a job, like there's two guys who hired to do this to kind of like take care of this kid, and guess what, the kid is just really like making them go through a lot. So I shout them out too. But yeah, is it the best film of the year? I would say it's one of the best, if not, I would say maybe top 15, top 20 for me. It's gonna be a hard year to go through my top 10. I'll be honest. I know Nick probably has the same issue. It's like man, like there's been I mean, I think 2024 has been this amazing year for films, both for original films, both for big budget films. I think that this is the year. Again, last year the big movies obviously were Oppenheimer and Barbie, but this year I think the box office has been a big hit. Whether it's stuff like Wicked and Gladiator, Long Legs, Twisters, like a lot of films this year have been really. I mean, Ends with Us was a book adaptation to like. There's been a good year for like really a great, for the box office. A lot of great films, both original studio and original indie films that has been really kind of fun to watch on the big screen with an audience, or even by yourself, even by myself. So I hope this is a good tee up for next year of like what 25 can bring us in terms of like both the caliber of big budget indie films. I'm really looking forward to it. But I'm gonna give ANORA a solid 8 out of 10 because my issues with it, you heard, was the pacing and something like the overbloated runtime. And what else I want to say? Something else I wanted to say, but I'm forgetting. There was some dialogue and dialogue. This, I think John Baker knows how to write dialogue very, very well, but there was times where dialogue kind of felt just like didn't fit the character's time. You're just like, okay, I don't think you would say that. I don't think you would say this. And it's like, oh, okay, sure, but. And some of the shots I kind of felt were a little dim, a little bit in the club. Like you really didn't see well. But yeah, I mean, I could add to the realness of being at a club, talking to people, whatever. But I do think the ending. I don't think Sean Baker's endings always work, because when Red Rocket ended, no spoilers. I was like, huh, okay. And when ANORA ended, people in my audience were like, wait, what? That's it? So the ending I didn't really care for either. And again, I would add that to his kind of like, he's not a strong suit of like endings and pacing. And when it ended, when I went home, I watched on YouTube of like, what does the ending mean? And I understood after hearing a few analysis and kind of explanation about it. Again, it wasn't like, what does that mean? It was like, ugh. But I was just like, wait, why did he end it there? I want to know why he decided to end it there. And seeing a few interviews, I respect what he was trying to go for, or what I'm hearing from, what I'm interpreting it from other reviewers, other analysis on YouTube. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But for me, when the way it ended, I was like, okay, I don't feel like the way I was fulfilled. But again, I remember the same issue with Red Rocket when it was like, this thing happens. You're just like, wait. And then like, oh, it made up to interpretation to you. And I'm like, okay. It's one of those movies. Okay, sure, whatever. So again, I don't need anything spoon-fed or kind of like on a silver platter to me. But I don't think, even Florida Project 2, when that ends, I was like, okay, and just kind of abruptly ends. You're just like, oh, okay, sure. So I would say that I kind of hope that maybe his next movie, whatever he does next, again, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Sean Baker does next for sure. How he kind of maybe like learns from his like pacing issues, or improves on pacing, improves on his ending. Because I do think he's kind of a pattern of like the way he paces his film. Maybe that's his style, and I made that come to respect that, which is totally fine too. Like I get it, but I do think I've never been fulfilled with any of his endings. So I would kind of hope to see what he does next in terms of like how he kind of ends his next film. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next. I think he's a filmmaker to watch. I do believe he'll probably stick with like Neon or A24 again. I think he has found his calling with like the lower indie budget films like A24 and Neon, even like maybe a Searchlight Pictures maybe, or maybe Focus Features. But I don't really see him doing like a big studio film anytime soon. I think he's kind of been very vocal that like this is his wheelhouse. He's cool with that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next. And yeah, I would not be surprised seeing this movie get a bunch of Oscar nominations, both for picture, directing, and writing. Definitely for Mikey Madison. And I hope the actor playing Igor definitely gets a nomination. I thought he was really funny, and he stole the show to me for the whole when he was introduced. So we shall see at the festival season, which is coming around the corner very soon, my friends. Alrighty, guys. With that said, that concludes this week's review Roundup episode for you guys this week. Like I said, next week, look out for our full episode of the podcast, and hopefully, if all goes well, we'll have our first video podcast for you guys. And until the meantime, my friends, hope you have an amazing, lovely holiday, Thanksgiving, Turkey Day. Eat some great food. Have fun with your friends, loved ones, family, friends. You name it. Go watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And one of my personal favorites to watch now for Thanksgiving now is Knives Out. Because it came out on Thanksgiving like 5 years ago. But my two favorites to watch for Thanksgiving, of course, is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And, of course, the first Knives Out. But let us know in the comments below on YouTube or Spotify, or DM us or on Instagram. Like, what do you guys love to watch or tradition you like to do for Thanksgiving. So we want to hear from you guys. But until then, my friends, we will see you guys at the movies.